on this computer. Ta-da. The chat is open if you want to have any questions. Let me unmute Sean. There you go. Okay. So hopefully everybody can hear and see, and you're all here. Adjusting to our new normal. This is crazy time that we're living with. You know, none of us have ever been through anything like this, but I hope you're doing really, really well. And we felt really bad. Sean and I met about 7 years ago, I think, when I first came to Sotheby's. You know, I was the city mouse and I met the country mouse. And over the past couple of years, I've been able to refer clients to Sean who are thinking of buying or selling property, and it's been a wonderful experience. My clients have loved working with him. So I thought I wanted to share him with you. And originally we started off and we were giving away free tickets to the Cottage Life Show, and the Cottage Life Show got canceled. So creativity being what it is, I thought it would be a great time for us to do this kind of a presentation. So I thought, let me share my screen with all of you. And I thought the first thing we would do is share a wonderful video that Sean had done. Can you see the video? I hope you can see the video. Just say yes if you can. Give me a yes. Yeah. Okay, here we go.
We don't have any volume there, Richard.
Oh, sorry. Not sure why it's giving you no
sound on the video.
No sound on the video. Sorry.
That's okay. We can always share it after if need be.
Exactly. We'll send it to everybody.
Yeah. Keep us telling us if we need to know something about the video.
So let me start off as well with this. Whoops. Can you see the PowerPoint? I hope.
Yeah, I got it now.
Yeah.
Can everybody see that? Okay, let's hope you can see it. So Sean, take it away. Just tell me when you want me to flip the charts, and I'm here for you.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks everybody. I'm absolutely overwhelmed with the fact that there's close to 50 of us on this call, and thanks to Richard for all the support. He's certainly lends to his clients, number one, but also to me. And it's a great collaboration when, I can try to offer the services that Richard offers his clients. And we're really in lockstep with what we deliver, the experience we deliver to either purchasers or sellers in the area. And, we usually get the opportunity at the kickoff of the season to speak to everybody who's interested at the Spring Cottage Life Show. But as Richard said, with things being what they are today, we weren't able to do that this year, and we thought we would see how this works out. So I've been speaking quite a bit on Zoom, as I'm sure many of us have, but this is sort of a little bit new to me, so bear with me. But I'm sure you'll enjoy Cottage Country 101 as I've presented it here. And please, if anybody has a question, put your hand up. Richard's going to field the questions, and we'll work through this, and hopefully we can just get a great conversation going.
The best thing would be to just leave a message on the chat, and then we will go through them at the end of the presentation as quickly as we can, and see how long it goes on for. Okay.
Sounds good. Thumbs up, everyone.
Is that good? Let's go.
Okay, so of course, my name's Sean Wolf. I've been in the business about 12 years as a realtor. I started in 2008, so I think it's sort of interesting that from a cyclical standpoint, although the circumstances are very different, we're back in sort of a unique time. And obviously we're trying to navigate it as best we can. And, you know, I think when we come out the other side of this, there may be some pent up demand, and we really just want to be ready for that challenge and to continue to offer the great service we know we do for our clients. So with that, let's get into it, Richard. We'll take the next slide.
Okay.
So basically what we're going to cover here are really what I look at or things to consider with purchasing a cottage or a waterfront property. So, you know, of course, location is important, access, what buildings are there on the property, waterfront, what the waterfront looks like, what the exposure is, and the topography. And so I see from John in San Francisco. Welcome, John. So we're really, when we're talking about Muskoka or Ontario's cottage country, we're talking about a 2 to 3 hour radius north of Toronto or the GTA. So we'll get into a little bit further about location, but for those of my friends who are in the US, when we talk about Muskoka or cottage country, the main area we're talking about is a couple hours north of Toronto. Next slide, please, Richard.
Yep. Should be up.
There we go. So again, look, location's really important for any purchaser, and for any seller. They've been through this process already. They know the location that they're in. They probably have come to love it. But typically, buyers will be satisfied with a 2 to 2.5 hour driving distance from Toronto. And if you've ever been on the 400 on a long weekend or a Friday afternoon, sometimes that can get extended out quite substantially to 3 or 4 hours, depending on whether there's traffic or not. I also, in my experience, have found that there's really a dividing line between whether you're going to head to Muskoka or some other cottage country areas. And that dividing line is what I typically call Yonge Street. It's really the longest, I think it's still the longest road in the world. And it extends right from, you know, the waterfront in Toronto all the way up to way further north than what we're talking about. But typically where people live in the city determines how far of a distance or determines the distance that they need to travel to get to waterfront property. So if you're kind of west of Yonge Street, you're typically going up the 400 and enjoying the Muskoka area. If you're a little bit east of Yonge Street, you're likely going to continue going east and hit the Kawartha Lakes or the Peterborough areas, which are both gorgeous. So when somebody's determining where they want to buy, they will always consider the amount of time it takes to get from A to B, of course. Go on there, Richard, yeah? Access. So for those who are sort of new to this idea, access is a really important consideration. And a couple of the big pieces are whether it's water access, meaning you have to go to a marina, you have to get in your boat and you're going to likely an island property. There are many properties that are water access that are still on the mainland but don't have roads to them.
What about for my airplane, Sean? If I decide to fly my airplane on there, my float plane.
You know what? That's a great point, Richard. There are we've had clients, and I certainly have had a few, and I know Max is on the call here as well. We can attest to the fact that there are many sellers and buyers who, in fact, choose to take a plane from the Toronto Harbor all the way up to Muskoka. It hasn't been my experience to be able to do that as an owner, but it's certainly, we can all dream about something. So I guess I should have added a fourth. So you're by a private year-round road, private seasonal road, year-round municipally maintained road, boat access. These are all different ways to get to the cottage. It impacts value as well. So if you're able to get there for year-round on a municipally maintained road, that is an important consideration with buying the property. How are we doing with questions so far, Richard? Do we have anything?
You know what? I will go to them as soon as we finish because just because we're on the PowerPoint, it's easier to get through them at the end.
Good enough. I'll soldier on.
Okay.
So waterfront is really important as well. And for me, unless I really know what the waterfront looks like, sometimes I will not sell that property in the winter because you can't see it. The reason is that in the winter with ice on, the things that you want to be looking at are how deep the water is at the shoreline, whether it's a sandy entry, whether it's shallow. Some sandy entries look great as a beach, but then there can be some vegetation in the summer months, and that's not ideal for swimming. So I think the key is just to make sure that the waterfront fits your idea of what cottaging looks like. Growing up, I always wanted to be able to jump off the dock, and in many cases off the boathouse, and you want to make sure there's enough depth to do that. And lots of people like to ski and keep their boat there. So you just want to make sure that you know all the factors of the waterfront, so you really know what you're purchasing. Privacy, another big one, and definitely a factor in the value of the property that you're purchasing. There are lots under 100 feet, but I would say in general, 100 feet of frontage is kind of the smallest frontage that you're going to have. And the larger the frontage, you can imagine the larger the amount of privacy there is. It's not to say that 100 feet of frontage can't offer excellent privacy. And typically, you know, we're really only using 30 or 40 feet of frontage between the dock and a little bit of a sitting area down there. So on some of the larger lakes, you need a minimum of 300 feet of frontage to get some entitlements, which is a whole other topic. But let's just say that if you're looking to have a property with a boathouse, you need at least 300 feet of frontage or more to be able to do that sort of thing on your property.
Sean,
So,
let me ask you a quick question, because
Sure.
I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are living in the city who are now thinking that an option for a time like this is to be out in a country property on a lake with 300 or 400 feet between you and your neighbor. Talk about social distancing. 300 or 400 feet is pretty good.
Well, it certainly is, and some of these properties can have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 acres. So there's lots of opportunity for social distancing, and certainly when I wake up in the morning and go for a walk, I rarely see anybody. So I've got the ultimate location right now for social distancing.
Perfect.
So the base value of a lot, however, just keep this in mind, is typically gauged by how much frontage that you have. And on some of the smaller lakes, you can probably get 100 feet of frontage, if you can find it, for that matter, in the $400,000 range. For 100 feet of frontage on one of the bigger lakes, you can be upwards of 800, 900, $1 million. And it just accelerates from there based on some of the factors we're talking about today.
So it's interesting for a city mouse like me, because in the city, we judge the value of a property oftentimes on the frontage, but the frontage on a street, where you would judge the value by the frontage on a lake or a private reserve or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, Richard, because when you arrive at your cottage property or your waterfront property in this area, you're actually arriving to the back of the property. You're not
Right.
arriving to the front. The front is considered where the value of the property is, which is on the water. So that's a great point, Richard. Next slide.
Yep. Should be there. It's exposure.
There we go. So I'm sure you can all imagine what the number one desired exposure is for cottage property. It's definitely west or southwest. People are looking for all day sun. And of course, all of these factors go into the value of a property. All day sun is great. And what they're especially looking for is the sunset. That is what people think of when they're winding down their day of having a cocktail on the dock, or a sunset water ski or wakeboard. Everybody's looking for that sunset, as well as the all day sun. Now, that's not to say that the other exposures are not equally as ideal. It's just a different perception. Lots of people like waking up to the morning sun and having the sun shining on their face with the coffee on the deck. That's great too. North, depending on the topography or the landscape, can provide all day sun in certain aspects. Or you might be able to enjoy the sunset from your dock depending on an alternate exposure.
Sean, I can see myself on that dock with a beer in my hand or a cocktail, and it's watching the sunset, and it's feeling good. It's looking good.
Yeah.
I may have to come and visit you.
Well, I actually have east exposure on my place, and you know what? I just love sitting down there with the sun coming up in the morning. It's a great way to wake up. The other thing to keep in mind, I was visiting one of our affiliates in Seattle. I think it was last spring, and we were out on the lakes there where Bill Gates has his place, and there's multi-million-dollar mansions. And I snapped a picture as we were going by in the boat, and it was sort of mid-afternoon, and the sun was beating down, and this property clearly had the most glorious west exposure. And what I noticed, which sort of sums it all up, is that every single blind in that house was down. They must have been getting basically fried in their living room. And so, that's one of the things you need to consider with a west exposure, is that you may love it outside, love the sunset, but you won't be able to stand your living room mid-afternoon, or you won't be able to enjoy the view because you got your blinds down and you've got your air conditioning cranked.
Yeah, exactly. It does put reality into effect sometimes, especially in the city. We'll deal with that sometimes when you're high on a condo and it's south facing. It's a wonderful view, but you get a lot of heat even during the winter. You have a very warm area that sometimes you'd love to be able to open a window or put on air conditioning, but sometimes it's not available.
Well,
anyway.
And where the sun lands, because you probably have a little indent in the carpet because your dog's lying there. It's their favorite spot for sure.
Exactly.
But,
exactly.
Your air conditioner is going to have a tough time to keep up, and as climate change happens, it is getting really, really hot in the afternoons up here, and people are less apt to be in the sun as much. So
when you mention climate change, last year, tell us a little bit about last year and the floods that you saw up in Muskoka.
Yeah, definitely. So, we're experiencing a unique situation right now with COVID-19. And when I think about last year, our season up here, and it is seasonal because of ice being on the lakes all winter, that just came off last week. But last year at this time, if I think back, our season was delayed as well because of flooding. I remember I had a closing on a pretty significant property on Lake Muskoka. And it was the end of April, beginning of May. And that boathouse, the deck of the boathouse was under 3 feet of water.
Oh my God.
So what happens is I believe it's the Ottawa Basin watershed, that the water comes all the way through the Muskoka River, comes into Lake Muskoka rises, and then it goes out through the Moon River into Georgian Bay. And there was just so much water that the water levels were really high. They didn't let enough water out over the winter, and then we did have some flooding problems. So that certainly is a consideration when buying near that watershed, or near the Muskoka River. or on Lake Muskoka is to really understand.
And I think what it really points out to a lot of people as well is it's very, very important for you to be working with a professional who knows the area. They understand, they know about the water issues, they know about sump pumps and all the other things that we need, and water quality. And you're much more aware of it. And oftentimes, it would be great for me. I would love to go out and sell a property in Muskoka, but it's much better for me to refer it to you because you know the background.
Yeah, it would be like me trying to sell a property and not in the city and not understanding what the parking situation is.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be representing my client properly, and I would need some help with that. In this area, it really does get complicated because if you factor in servicing, which up here is septic and water from the lake or from a well, and then you couple that with all the different townships we work in up here.
Oh my God.
You know, so every different township has a different zoning bylaw, a different official plan. And if you're not really adept at understanding how all of that goes together, your client might be in a situation, or your seller client will be in a situation that you're not representing their best interests. And we never want to be in that position.
No. So, whoops, let me go back. Topography. Tell us about topography.
Okay, so many factors with topography. I'll start with the easiest one. As we get older, and the more stairs there are down to the water, it becomes a challenge. So you need to think about what your lifestyle is going to look like long term when you're getting into a property. You know, 50, 60 stairs might be okay now when we're a little bit younger, but maybe hopefully your parents are still around and they may not be able to get into the cottage. The second part of that is that if you have an east-facing property or something that's not west, let's say, so there's varying degrees of that, of course, and you're on a bit of an incline like this, your son is not going to have much of an opportunity to get past the hill. You know, the third part of that is if you want to have a driveway that's going to come anywhere close to your back door for bringing groceries and whatnot in, if you're on a hill, you've now got a driveway that's on a hill, or you've got stairs from your parking area down to your back door. That's not ideal either. Now,
it's definitely a challenge. I was just going to tell you the story. My cousin has a place out in the Sunshine Coast, and when his parents were aging, he, thank God, had the money to put in a funicular that took them from the house down to the water. But sadly, it took them over 1.5 years to build it and put it in. It cost, I think, about $250,000 to do it. And by that time, his mom and dad, well, his mom had passed, and then his dad passed very soon after. So I'll be using it soon.
Good. Well, and now the funicular or the lift is in place.
Yeah.
So that's going to be okay. Think about this. If you have a driveway that's on a bit of an incline and you're planning on using your property year round, what does that look like in the winter?
Yep.
So there's many different layers to each facet here.
Let's move on to improvements. Yeah.
Improvements. This is a big topic. So let me describe it like this. Is that we've got a spectrum. And at one end, we've got what I describe as a very visionary buyer. That's a person who could take a piece of raw land or a cottage that you might want to tear down or do substantial renovations to. And those people are here on this side. And then on the other side, you've got the turnkey buyer. The turnkey buyer is one who literally wants to show up. Maybe the place is already furnished. They drop their bags, they move in and they go to the fridge and grab a beer and they're there. The reality is that there's more turnkey than visionary in my experience. But I would say the majority are leaning more towards turnkey than they are visionary. So that presents special challenges for the buyer. The other thing to keep in mind is that the turnkey buyer, the turnkey seller is always commanding a premium. If you have something that's updated, looking gorgeous, really furnished nicely and ready to go, you're always going to pay a little bit more for that property. On the other end, if you're a visionary buyer, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, which is you better understand, or you better have proper representation in place to really navigate what the property entitlements are. Now, somebody who's truly turnkey may be able to create value for themselves as they move through the process of taking it from being a visionary property to a turnkey property. So there is an opportunity for the work that they put in.
I definitely fall in the turnkey area.
Me as well. Now, remember, this is a spectrum, right? So you can be more leaning towards turnkey, but the improvements that you're going to do are less minor than a substantial renovations.
Yeah.
So coming in and updating a kitchen or doing some new flooring or maybe adding a Muskoka room, those would put you more in the turnkey category than the true visionary, or somewhere in the middle.
Services.
Yeah, so on to services. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. We know that the majority, well, all of them are typically on septic. So it's important when you buy a property to understand what's there. If you're more of that visionary buyer, you're likely going to have to deal with your septic at some point. But at the start, you want to know how old it is. Has it been maintained? Is the septic bed in good shape? We certainly have home inspectors that can help us with that process, but it's important to know what's there. The other thing is that if you're more of a visionary buyer and you're looking at a smaller property with the intention of building, so we're talking about vacant land here, you want to make sure that you have enough space or an available area to place a septic system. So, this is what's taking care of all of our stuff. So we want to make sure that we're in good shape on that, because, I do host in a rental property that I have lots of folks from the city. And, I think at sometimes they assume that, it's on servicing like being in an urban environment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a matter of education and really letting everybody know how that stuff is taken care of in cottage country.
Yeah, I remember visiting a friend's cottage, and we had to drive about 10 miles to put things in the garbage.
Yeah,
So,
that's a great question. So there's many different situations. For example, I live on a municipally maintained road. I have the luxury of having garbage and recycling pickup at the end of my driveway, but that's definitely not the norm. You can either take it to a transfer station, or if you're on an island, for example, you have to boat it back to the marina and then take it to a transfer station. So that's another important aspect of servicing. But you're typically going to have hydro, but there are areas or properties that are off the grid, so there might be solar in place. Internet's a huge thing, especially right now, as people potentially want a little more space. They're going to be asking, or it's going to be entirely important to them to make sure that they have internet available so they can work from their new principal residence, which is now the cottage.
exactly. Sean is now at our Muskoka office, our new Muskoka office, basically because when he was at his home and working on the internet, we were not getting a strong enough signal so that he could get, so that the picture would be clear enough, et cetera, and we kept losing each other. So internet is very, very important. We take it for granted in the city, but once you get up north, it can change.
No, so it's important that your realtor knows the options that are available and can recommend a proper service provider.
But
So
you need to get better internet for your house.
listen, Richard, I've been working on it. I've been working on it. It wasn't too long ago that I was still on dial-up, believe it or not. So,
I believe it. I
you know,
believe it.
the fact that I can stream Netflix once in a while is good.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, the other thing I'll mention is that water systems are an important consideration as well. Typically, you're taking from the lake. There is filtration systems available and UV lights, so you can get potable water, which is important if you're financing.
So we've got the chat going now. So let me see if there are some questions. Oh my God, John Caruso is there from, hey, John, how are you? Oh my God.
Hey,
It's
John.
great to see. Hey, John. Okay, questions. Can you give us a location? Oh, you looked on the map. We've got it. Yeah, just north of the city. Beautiful property. Short-term rentals.
Sure.
What's happening with short-term rentals these days?
Well, right now they're being strongly discouraged given our current climate. But you know, in a normal season, short-term rentals are fine here. They're encouraged. It's a large part of the economy up here, and a lot of the businesses that are very seasonal, you know, depend on tourism. So, does every neighbor love the fact that you're renting out your cottage? No, but I think at the same time, if you're properly vetting your guests and making sure that you have the right systems in place, you can do it and do it well.
I would love to hear about opportunities outside of the Muskoka on smaller lakes and in other locations, east like the Kawarthas, Lake of Bays. Are there opportunities on the smaller lakes outside of Muskoka near cute little towns like Dorset, Baysville, Bracebridge, and would also like to hear about the cottage rental ban that's being enforced.
Yeah, so
is that real?
It's I don't know how they're going to enforce it, but places like Airbnb or cottages in Canada, you know, it's being encouraged that nobody's leaving the city and coming up to cottage. So I'm not sure how they're enforcing it, but they're certainly relying at everybody's good judgment to stay where they are. And the reason for that is very simple. Is as much as we accommodate, you know, tens of thousands of people in the summertime, our hospitals are prepared. This is my understanding of it anyway. Our hospitals are prepared for broken arms and scrapes and you know, putting stitches in, but they would not have the bed space nor the ventilators required to support a large number of people, you know, with respiratory problems.
And that's more the consideration, is it?
It is. You know, but on the other hand, like I mentioned earlier, I feel very comfortable sheltering in place at my cottage. And if I were a cottage owner, you know, I would have a tough time not wanting to come up here either. So, you know, I'm right down the middle on this one.
So Shen Walji from Dan Cooper Group in Oakville and wants to know what's the minimum down payment and qualifications required from a finance perspective to own a recreation property.
Yeah.
So it's not it won't be the main. In other words, it would be a secondary property. Does that change?
I believe it does, but Richard, if we could just go back to the other question just for a second about smaller lakes. So just quickly, there's Muskoka's a district. It's a very wide area that's made up of a number of different townships. Lake of Bays is just adjacent to it, over near Huntsville, so a little bit east of here.
Great shopping there. Great shopping in that Robinson store.
Oh, isn't it wonderful?
I know it is. It's like coming out of another world.
There are so many like really neat little areas. The area offers so much to all the people who enjoy it. But there are thousands of lakes of varying different sizes. So are there opportunities on small lakes? You bet. You bet. I've been on a smaller lake for, you know, better part of 20 years now. I purchased my first cottage up here, for I think it was 180,000 in 2001, and you're probably just a little bit shy of $1 million now. So there's tons of opportunities, and you see older cottages being torn down and rebuilt. So if you find you might be able to find one for 400,000 or 500,000 that you could tear down and make your own and not be underwater from a value standpoint.
So also one of the other questions I was going to ask is to do with boats, motor boats as opposed to non-motor boats, because I know that there's some lakes where they restrict motor boating.
Yeah, another good question. So I in fact just firmed up on a referral from you, Richard. Thank you very much. This Monday, and it's on a smaller lake just east of Bracebridge, and it is from the ministry designated a non-motorized lake.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is I don't see very often. What I do see more often are smaller lakes where the lake associations have determined that it's a non-motorized lake, or they've put restrictions on the size of motors that will allow. So you might be able to have a small tin boat with a less than 10 horsepower motor. But I think the idea here is that they don't want to have wakeboard boats and sea-doos and all this other activity running around that may disturb their quiet enjoyment. So there are lakes like that, and whether they're regulated by the Cottage Association or by the ministry would need to be determined. And then of course you've got the bigger lakes that are fully motorized and have lots of activity going on.
Lots of activity, and you have to be a safe boat driver, and you're subject to a lot of it's subject to the RCMP keeping an eye on you as well. So we have, sorry.
And you also see, I've seen folks who have had properties or have cottaged on the larger lakes moving to smaller lakes because they're finding the activities too much. Now you gotta determine that on a property by property basis. You could be right in the main lane, or if you were just a little bit over and off to a bay, it probably wouldn't impact you as much.
So we have an answer here from Sandra, who is a mortgage broker. Hi, Sandra. Wave. There we go. She says 20% down usually. If a second home can be inhabited in the 4 seasons, you may be able to buy with less than 20% down. So that's great. And John, Mr. Caruso down in San Francisco, yes, we are in Canada. The lakes freeze over in the winter. It does happen, The thing I love, just as a little aside, people, we have a pond in our backyard. It's 4.5 feet deep. And every time people come out in our backyard and they look around, they look at the fish in the pond and they go, oh, what do you do with them in the winter? And I go, well, what do we do with fish in the winter? They go down, they go down to the bottom.
So how we doing? Any more questions?
Let me see.
I think I saw Friley had a question.
Sorry, Friley. Hey, Friley. Where are the feeder markets for Muskoka? Oh, everywhere. Los Angeles.
Yeah.
We've had quite a number of movie stars up in Muskoka, haven't we?
We certainly have, and some of them are still around here. I would say to answer that question, it's generally the GTA or Southwestern Ontario, but we get lots of people from New York and New York State and New York City. Historically, there have been lots from Chicago, LA, really over North America. We also see a lot of expats coming back, and the best points for my American friends here to encourage your clients to come this way is think about the dollar discount they could get right now.
Yeah, and we also go down to a lot of conferences in the States and we support them with our money.
Yes, of course, they're probably missing our tourism right now as we are theirs.
So something here from Williamson. It says, having grown up in Muskoka and now owning property there, the history of the region attracted me. Originally, it was the place to be for North USA residents in the Toronto area who traveled by train to Gravenhurst and took mail ships from there to the former farming houses and became resorts, Cleveland House, Elgin House, and now Lake Joe Club. I've explored the area, and as National Geographic indicated in 2011, the Muskoka region is one of the top places to vacation in the world. Some of our friends from the South may not realize that when you get into Muskoka, you basically get into the Canadian Shield. And so the topography changes and it becomes really quite something to see.
Yeah, you know what? That's the history is really, really interesting. In fact, there's a couple of well, there's at least two, if not more, steamships that still operate. So if you're exploring the area, you can almost you know, go back in time, hop on the Seguin, and tour the lakes. But just as a quick addition to that, what I learned was that the further the ship went to drop you off, the more exclusive the area. And as you move out from Lake Muskoka into Lake Rosso and Lake Joe, you know, development happened further out over time. So northern Lake Joe has got some of the most gorgeous properties with the best privacy, most waterfront, and most exclusive areas. So it really is a neat history.
So Andy, our friend from out in Victoria. Hey, Andy, how are you? Andy asks what a Muskoka room is, because I assume if you have Muskoka Cottage, you have Muskoka, each of them are Muskoka rooms, but tell me what a Muskoka room is.
You know what? We sometimes get lost in our vernacular.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, quite simply, it's a screened-in porch. So, you know, in the springtime, there may be a couple of mosquitoes and black flies around. So it's always great to be able to sit outside at dusk in a screened-in porch to enjoy the sights and sounds. So yeah, Muskoka room's essentially a really nice screened-in porch.
So I think that our friend John from San Francisco wants to move up here, and we'd love to have him here. So to look for listings up there, sotheby's.ca, but also what about your website?
Yeah, so sotheby'srealty.ca, seanwolf.com. You can follow me on Instagram. Anybody who, and right now, by the way, on Instagram, I've pivoted a little bit to send out what I call the Muskoka moments, just to let people imagine what life's going to be like when all of this current situation is over. So I'm available at all those places. You can check out Cottages, and if you have some interest, I'm happy to you know, talk to you a bit more about what your criteria is, and see if we can't find you your dream cottage.
So just a little aside for everybody. Please know that this is all going to be taped. That tape will be posted. It'll be posted on my Facebook page. It'll also be posted on our Torontoism website, which is the website for Silver Burtnick and Associates. It'll also be posted on YouTube, and we'll probably post it on Sean's website as well. So you'll be able, if your questions didn't get answered as well, please email Sean. Me, I'm just the interviewer here, so he can answer the questions. I am definitely a city mouse who grew up in Alberta, doesn't know the country properties at all going north of the city.
You may be a city mouse, but you certainly are in front of this, you know, our current situation with the technology you're working with, and all the great interviews that you've done. And you know, if people are interested, there's lots more to talk about. We could certainly get into a little bit more detail about areas, townships, and maybe some other planning considerations to think about.
Does anybody, if people are interested, can you just give us a hands up that you would be interested in a further conversation next week? Because we can do again next week, 4 p.m. on the Thursday, and that would be great to see. Absolutely, 48 hands. Yep, great.
Great.
So
Perfect.
we'll come back here next Thursday at 4 p.m. at the same location, and I'll post another invite, and we'll get into deeper issues. We'll dig deeper. I want to talk a little bit about, where the heating system goes down, 50 feet, 100 feet into the yard, and we don't have that in the city as much. We do have it in more of the suburbs, but
Yeah, you're talking geothermal. I mean, there's lots to talk about, and I certainly would be happy to do more of this, or if anybody just wants to speak to me one-on-one, let's connect and keep the conversation going. And the more we can do this sort of pre-education before physically going out and seeing property, the better, because then you're actually you have in mind what you're looking for, and the considerations are what I look at when I'm showing property to evaluate. But I will mention one important thing is that it's probably similar in the city as well, Richard. There's no perfect 10 out there. If we get a 7 or 8, we're in really good shape. But it takes seeing a few to really understand that that's the case.
So Sean, while we've got you here, give us your phone number.
So area code 705-774-0029.
And your email address.
SWOOF, so SWOOF as in Frank. Yes, my last name is actually Woof.
I didn't say anything. I said nothing.
I listen, I grew up with it. I understand. It's okay. Roll call was always the worst time.
Thank God you're not on Grindr, because on Grindr you woof somebody.
Okay.
We'll forget about that.
All right. So swoof@sotheby'srealty.ca. My Instagram is Sean Wolf Cottages. And, give me a call anytime, send me a note. Happy to always chat about cottages. And, I've been putting in quite a few hours lately on Zoom. So if that works for you too, I'd be happy to do that.
That would be great. Also, if you need me, 416-587-3300. You can get in touch with me or Jim Burtnick as well. We are both at I am R Silver at sotheby'srealty.ca, and Jim is J Burtnick, BURTNICK, at sotheby'srealty.ca. And just want to say thank you very, very much for joining us. And, if you want to stay, I can open the chat, but I'm going to stop recording. But why don't I do that?